that 90% plus of the fruit of discipleship is in the multiplication, right? So you make disciples, but if your disciples make disciples and make disciples, like so much more fruit is created by that multiplication than what you actually do during the season. So if that's true, then that means 90% of the fruit is probably going to be created in this send-off immersion. That's how important this is. So this is the moment where we want to put the seed in the fruit. This is when we make sure the disciple making is about making disciple makers and not just about sort of the one generation. Yay, I consumed your program. Now I'm going to go consume somebody else's program. That's not what we want to be creating.
Hey friends, welcome to the 1000 Houses podcast, where we encourage and equip households to make disciples in and through the home. Every episode, you'll hear interviews, teachings, and conversations around what it looks like to turn your home into a hub for mission, community, and discipleship. If you'd like to learn more about what entering into a season of coaching might look like for you and your household, visit 1kh.org for more info. Let's jump into today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome to the 1000 Houses podcast. I'm excited to bring you guys this episode. This is actually a segment that April and I recorded today for our disciple making course, Life Discipleship. You guys, if you want to check that out, go to 1kh.org. But yeah, one of the things we discovered something. So there's probably 30 plus videos in that course that outline our entire blueprint for how to make disciples. And one of the big components of that is we advocate for these immersion events, kicking off your disciple making with a day or a getaway, and then ending with a getaway. But one of the things we discovered recently is that if you, during your send-off getaway, that final immersion event, if you design that around reproduction, it's a huge game changer. So we're going to add this content to the course. But for those of you guys listening to this, I'm excited for you. If you've thought about disciple making blueprints, or you have a method of making disciples, then consider listening to this and adding this tool to your tool belt, because what we're trying to figure out is how to make sure that our disciples are making disciples. We're not just making disciples, we're making disciple makers. So that's what this is all about. And if you're curious about maybe finding a blueprint for discipleship, please check out Life Discipleship at 1kh.org and consider joining us for a whole season of learning about how to make disciples. We would be happy to coach you. April and I are on most of those calls. And so we would love to personally help you figure this out. So, but yeah, enjoy this episode, and thanks for any efforts that you guys are putting into discipleship. Hey guys, so this is a update video for the Life course. We want to be walking you guys through some of the latest sort of tactics that we find are most helpful, that we're discovering after having created the Life course, to add as bonus content. This is a big one. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this. April and I wanted to share with you guys something about the send-off immersion event. So you guys know, as we've been talking and walking you guys through how to do a disciple-making group, we talk about bookending the disciple-making season. Let's say you're doing 4 or 5 months. You have a kickoff, kind of getaway, kickoff immersion event, 24 hours or some kind of event that really like solidifies the start of the launch of your disciple-making season. And then we have a send-off or a final kind of immersion event. So I've done different things for the send-off, and April and I have really begun to think about this primarily as a event to launch their own disciple-making groups. So we were thinking about this all along, but I played around with it because is that necessary? I now think this is like a really, really good idea. So I want to describe why, and then I'm going to ask April a bunch of questions, because she led a send-off event with 3 ladies she was discipling, and she really designed it around multiplication, around helping them get their groups started. So why is this such a big deal? Why do we recommend that you end every single disciple-making group with a send-off that is about multiplication, about them starting their own groups? So I just want to remind you guys of a few things we've talked about in the course. Number one, that 90% plus of the fruit of discipleship is in the multiplication, right? So you make disciples, but if your disciples make disciples and make disciples, like so much more fruit is created by that multiplication than what you actually do during the season. So if that's true, then that means 90% of the fruit is probably going to be created in this send-off immersion. That's how important this is. So this is the moment where we want to put the seed in the fruit. This is when we make sure the disciple making is about making disciple makers and not just about sort of the one generation. Yay, I consumed your program. Now I'm going to go consume somebody else's program. That's not what we want to be creating. And so a big part of Life on Life is how do we crack that code? The other reason that we talk about a lot is that there are almost no examples of disciple making getting to the fourth generation in the West. It's happening in South America. It's happening in Africa. It's happening in Asia. It is not happening in Europe or in North America. It's almost non-existent. Every time I talk to a disciple maker, I'm like, I ask the question, is your movement getting to the fourth generation in the West? And if they say yes, then I'm like immediately like, I want to study it. I want to understand it. But 99% of the time they say, no, we haven't figured that out yet. So this is our attempt at getting to the fourth generation, is this send-off event. This is the tool that we're advocating for that we think could get us there. So that's why it's such a big deal. And I want you guys to really pay attention to how we think about this tool. Okay. So I want to just kind of hear, April, you walk through, maybe first of all, tell me a little bit about leading up to your send-off event. Yeah. What were you thinking about? How were you designing it? Then I'd like to just kind of walk step by step through what happened, because just spoiler alert, at the end of April's send-off event, that all three of her ladies had started groups, either had started or have now started groups. So it worked. In other words, they're all multiplying, which is amazing, because I think that her group was a group of people that I think arguably have the best excuse not to reproduce, I think, because they're young moms with young kids. And that is the hardest demographic, I think, to do reproduction in and through. And if you can succeed there, you can succeed with any other group. There's no excuse for anyone else, in my opinion. So anyway, April, talk us through a little bit about kind of preparing for the send off. And then I'd like to just kind of step by step kind of get as practical as possible for somebody who's like, okay, I'm taking notes. I want to reproduce this. What could they do?
Yeah. So the group that I was working with were like early 30s moms of 2 to 5 children. 2 of the 3 were pregnant. One of them was in between pregnancy. And my goal for the whole time was to make this, what I'm doing with them, something that serves them in such a way that makes it possible for them to commit to what I'm asking for them to do in this season of their life. But then also, so what I actually did for them wouldn't be completely reproducible, because I was serving them in a lot of ways, like going to their house during the nap time of their kids so that we could have a one-on-one. Now, they wouldn't be able to do that for someone else, but so they couldn't completely copy what I was doing. But at the end, in our send-off, my goal was to help. I'm like, we have got to figure this out for young moms. This has to be doable. And I think the whole idea of it being like a 4 to 5 month commitment is very reassuring as a young mom, because we might not know what tomorrow holds, but we can kind of look at the next 12 months and say, so I had a when, like in the next 12 months, when do you think you might possibly have a 4 to 5 month window where you would be able to have the brain space to kind of commit to something? We'll talk about what the something is, but let's talk about the when. And so, like I said, one of them, she was 37 weeks pregnant. So she had just finished one that she had started while we were discipling. Another lady was about halfway through her pregnancy. So she was going to try to fit one in really soon after we finished so that she could start and be done before the baby comes. And then the third one, she just had, she was open pregnancy wise, but lots of little ones on her, in her family. So the idea of picking a when over the next 12 months and just committing yourself to this thing for that season, I think is really helpful. Instead of thinking like, I have to endlessly, forever and always be doing this.
Right.
And I do think we need to recommit to that then the following year. And hopefully that will be like a follow-up conversation that we have. But for the when for them was one of the first questions.
Yeah. So as you guys are listening to this, so one of our elements of the disciple making blueprint that we've decided to really sort of solidify is to define what obedience to the Great Commission is. And so what we decided is obedience to the Great Commission is making a disciple, maybe a small group of disciples, but having a season of disciple making where you're making a disciple at least once every 12 months. That's kind of what April and I are saying. That's what 1KH is really advocating for. And so if that's a 4-month season, that's only 4 months out of the 12, right? So you don't have to be constantly disciple making, but every 12 months, every year, you need to decide a when. And so you can design this perfectly around your schedule to make sure that there's not some giant life event that's happening that you need to, that's going to like make you burn out in the middle of your disciple making. But we want to make sure that we are trying to define obedience. In other words, Jesus said, go and make disciples. And for a lot of people, they're like, yeah, I'll get to that someday. It's like, how do you know you're obeying Jesus when you made such a direct command? My assumption then is like, maybe you're not obeying Jesus. I mean, if you're listening to this and you're like, I haven't made a disciple this year, last year, the year before, then how do you know if you're in active sort of rebellion against the king? Like, I know it's kind of a heavy way to put it, but I think that we are neglecting this very important role or this very important command. And so we want to be clear about what obedience is. And I think this is one of the reasons we're not getting to the 4th generation. One of the reasons is we're not defining obedience properly. We're not actually describing what it means to follow this command. So April, you're saying one of the elements is during the send-off getaway, make sure every single person is setting a date. Like, it doesn't have to be but by October, I'm going to launch a group. And so a launch date is set during the send-off. So everyone that you discipled in the last season, they have actually got on their calendar a date in the next 12 months where they're going to launch their group. So that's a key component. Okay, cool.
Yeah. It's important to say, I think a lot of people in this season of young moms, it's easy to say and totally true that like, I'm making disciples of my children. And that is absolutely our first priority. Absolutely. And it is true. You are making disciples. When are they going to be ready to then also make disciples is the long game, right? It's going to be years and years and years and years down the road of you absolutely pouring your life into them. So we're talking about the one kind of like spiritual rhythm outside of the family. When you start to get bandwidth, then we need to remember that we're in a battle. This matters. This is really important. And our kids need to see us making disciples, not just 100% completely focused on them. They need to see that we're about something bigger than ourselves. So
Awesome.
I just want to say I kind of laid that foundation too. And I would talk about it. Every time we met, I would talk about, okay, make some notes. Like, how would you do this if you had an imaginary group, like how would you reword this? Or what would is there anything that you would, from what I did today, something that you could replicate for yours? Yeah. So I would kind of pepper that throughout our 4 months, 5 months together. Then the next thing we talked about is the who. And so I know you cover this in one of your teaching sessions, but just to review really quickly, kind of go a season or two before you are. So for me, I'm a new grandma and my youngest is 15. So I can go like mom of young kids. I could also go college students. I could go teenage girls, middle schoolers. So all of those would be great categories. I'm probably not going to start discipling women who are veteran grandmothers and maybe even a great grandma, So look at the season that you're in life and then kind of go the next layer down. If you've been married for like 10, 15 years, you've got 2 or 3 kids, 3 or 4 kids, you're out of the diaper phase, then maybe you could go on down to, and I'm talking obviously to moms, you would go on down to maybe a newlywed gal or a newlywed with her firstborn baby or something like that. So kind of think like the season right before you.
Yeah.
Is like and then I also feel like the number 3 is a really good number. Not that that's the right way to do it or anything, but I think that you get some synergy from having 3 people. 2 would be okay, but I think the 3rd really gives it like this energy behind the commitment with people showing up and participating and like doing the assignments and getting feedback from those assignments. You get to hear other people's ideas, what other people are going through, and it kind of gets your mind thinking when hearing it from that many people. So I think that 3 is a good number. Not a requirement, but it's a good number.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. So we've looked at the when. We're going to set a date. So everyone you disciple is going to have a date on the calendar. Then we're going to create a profile. There's a clear who. So we're going to talk through what that is. And sometimes you want to get more specific. Like sometimes I'm like, there's a guy that I'm working with right now, and he just really into mechanics. And he's like, I would love to disciple guys who are like into that. Okay. the more narrow your profile is, the more you need to make sure that you have a pipeline of potential disciples, so that you have to actually find a ministry or a place in the city where those people are gathering in large enough numbers that you could make disciples, over and over again if you're participating in that ministry. Another guy that I met with who's kind of college aged, he's like, I don't know any high schoolers, but I feel like I should be discipling high school boys. And I just met with the regional director of the FCA Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and he told me about this program they have where they have what's called a character coach come into different sports and actually give lessons, and you can meet guys who are really on fire for Jesus in those contexts, or there's Young Life clubs. There's lots of places you can go. A lot of people we're not serving in the place where we're likely to meet the people that is on that profile. So you want to help during your send off. If they know lots of people in that profile, great. You've checked that box. You're going to find those people. Immediately they're going to be able to start a group. But a lot of people are like, I would love to make disciples of this kind of this age group, but I don't know where to go. So I want to make sure we're also answering that question. If we're answering the who, we got to also find out where the who is, right? So we're all trying to get the seed in the fruit. Okay, so we've got the when, we got the who. What's next?
Okay, so then there's the what. And I should say that I had them bring their laptops. I said, if you have a laptop, bring it, or a journal. So they brought their laptop with them on our weekend getaway. And so this was us spending like the last morning together, like 5-6 hours at a coffee shop, just cranking stuff out. So they were literally typing it up or writing it in their journal of what their plan was and the who, and they were really being able to kind of process through. So then the what is kind of like your table of contents for what you want to pass on to people. So this is when you do some, what's that?
The list of trainings, the menu of trainings, catalog of trainings. Yeah.
Catalog of training. Yeah. And so this is where people start to get really insecure and they're like, oh, I don't have anything to offer. I'm just me. And I'm only this old and I only have this many kids and I've only lived this long and it's like, stop. So what I encourage my ladies to do is to say like, God, will you remind me all the things you've taught me through the years? I'm going to look at myself like 10 years ago. And how has God been faithful to me? Oh, he did teach me this. Oh, he did teach me that. Wow, I've come a long way in this one thing. And so once they were able to do that, they just I said, just bullet point it out. You don't have to write a paragraph or make it like succinct, just like one topic that came out was like eating right or food or something like that. And another topic was like taking risks with your husband. Another topic was sleep training your babies. So there's these things that they're like, but can you disciple someone in that? Is that a discipleship topic? And so we talked about how to bring scripture into that and like getting a layer deeper in the why is that an important topic and what does that unlock for your family? And you could unlock someone else, So they kind of spent a lot of time coming up with like 4, 5, 6 topics. Because if you think about like a 4-month time period, and you are going to meet, well, we'll talk about that in the next one, the how, but you want to come up with enough topics to kind of fill your time that you're going to have with the ladies. And just, you can do that in one brainstorming session. So they really worked on that for like 30, 45 minutes. And then I would just if I saw them kind of slowing down, I would kind of just pop out another question or two, like, okay, so remember, think about something that's been new and different for you. Think about maybe a passage that went deep for you, or maybe think about something you and your husband have gone through or been through that you feel like could minister to someone else. Think about something you've learned in schooling, like educating your children, and so those kinds of things.
Right.
I would prompt them.
This is the life on life part of discipleship, where you are apprenticing people in your way of life. And we separate that from the Discovery Bible Study, where we're apprenticing them under Jesus so they can follow Jesus. So we have a whole way of doing that. But yeah, these catalog of trainings is really important. You guys know there's a video on how to create that. And we've got other tools we've created now, prompts and things. But you had the lady sitting there. I think I saw a picture of them in a coffee shop with all their laptops open. And it's just really, the more busy the people you're discipling are, the more critical it is for you to get a lot of work done during this send-off event. Like, this is precious time. You've got 24 hours. Yes. Why not basically have them design their entire disciple-making blueprint during that 24 hours? And that's what we're talking about. If you can answer virtually every single question and all they have to do is push a button and start to make disciples, And that's kind of what you want to get it down to. Like even writing the email invite, we'll talk about that,
Yeah,
I
I was
think, in a
gonna
minute.
say I had them do that with the who.
Okay.
Like write up your email. Like you thought of the person and the kind of demographic. Now write an email to this imaginary person. Now write in there the things that you want to ask of them, which kind of gets to the next one is the how. And so they were constantly going back to that email and like adding to it or tweaking it as we went through the different questions. But the how is kind of the bones, the structure of how you're going to present this material, how you're going to, actually like meet and disciple with them, the people that you're discipling. So, for example, the way I did it with my ladies was we met every other week for 2 hours, and I'm in the stage where I have teenage kids. So, two of my daughters babysat their kids while we were meeting. And then once a month, I tried to do a one-on-one with each one of the 3 ladies. And so I would say, okay, it's February. Here are I'm going to try to do these on Tuesdays in the afternoon on Tuesdays. And usually I could do that. Sometimes I had to come up with another, because for my rhythm, I had Tuesday afternoons open for doing those one-on-ones. And then we tweaked it if it didn't work for them. But they would get to pick one Tuesday that month that worked for them. And then I would go to their house and we would sit there during their kids' nap time and do our one-on-one part. So I offered every other week get together for everyone, and then a once a month one-on-one. And then of course the kickoff and the send-off. And then we had a WhatsApp chat also, and that was super helpful to stay connected through the season. And we were asking each other questions. They would throw something out about something they were encountering, everything from like how to deal with one of their kids or something they found in scripture, or it was like kind of an intimate place to be able to ask a hard question, even a topic that we had been discussing in one of the group sessions, and we would kind of like continue to hash it out on the WhatsApp group. So just to give you an example, more examples of how this could look for young moms, the ladies that have gone ahead and discipled. One of them, she goes to the YMCA. That's where she takes advantage of the childcare there and works out. So she wanted the girl she was discipling, to learn how to do physical challenges, because motherhood is very physically challenging, and she wanted them to learn that. So she was going to have them get a Y membership and meet her at the Y on this day and this day while her kids are in childcare, and they were going to work out together and then have like a little talk at the end. And then another one, and I think they did that maybe, I don't remember the frequency that was offered. And then another one of them is doing like the time frame that works best for her is 6 to 8 a.m. And so she's only doing 2 ladies, and she's offering them 2 one-on-ones a month for them to come, but they come to her house between 6 and 8 a.m. Her husband's home and he can take care of the kids while she's meeting with them. And then once a month, they're getting together on a Monday afternoon at her house while her mom comes over and watches her kids, so that she is available to do that, but just once a month for everyone. And so this is like a 4-month thing that she's doing, 4 or 5 months. And another one is like really excited about having these she's doing college age girls who aren't married yet. And so she's very wanting them to be around their family as much as possible. So she's doing a lot of overlap like with their family. So for example, their kickoff was meeting at a coffee shop first and talking about what they wanted to do, putting some dates on the calendar. And then they went on a canoeing trip with her husband and her 3 little kids, and she's pregnant with her 4th. And she brought these 2 college girls along. So it's like amazing. And she knows these girls need to see like a strong man, a husband leading kids, a man who loves his children, kids who love their dad, and like all the dynamics that go into a canoe trip. And so it's just really cool to see them catch the vision of like, what is going to make this possible for me to do this, sustain it through a 4-month season, 4 to 5 month season. And then what do I think these people need? How can I pour into them? But then also focusing on their family and making sure it works for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So the how can be very custom to you. Now,
Yes.
what you have to do, the more custom your how is, the more important it is that you do what we're talking about right now. And that is during a send off, help the next person come up with their how. Because if your how is super custom to you, your people you disciple might love it, but they might be scratching their heads thinking, I could never do this. I don't have a husband, so how am I supposed to take him on a canoe trip? So you have to, that's why during the send off, you really need to help them define their how, because it's going to look very different for them. But you have to answer these questions. And of course, if people don't, and April's, as you're going into all the logistical details, these details are really important because these are the things that stop reproduction. This is the stuff that just ends the whole process. So we got to help people overcome these things. Okay.
Yes.
So we got the when, the who, and the what, and you said, and the how. You started, we already hit that, or is that next?
Yeah, the how is like, how often are you going to meet? What are you offering to them? And then you go back and incorporate that into the email. And so, but the biggest ask, you're saying, I want you to commit to 2 one-on-ones a month and 1 group session or whatever the thing is. But you're saying, I also want you to commit to, at the end of this, you're going to launch a season of making disciples yourself sometime in the next 12 months. And so for me, that was the biggest ask in that email. And if this isn't a good time for you, if this isn't a good season, you don't think that this is something you can really devote yourself to, that's totally fine. I'll keep you on my list and I can ask you the next time I'm ready to launch something. But you really want people who this is like the next level. This is like not a discover and see if someone's interested in Jesus or see if they're following God. These are people who are like, I want to follow Jesus. I love God. I am committed. I want to be a radical follower of him. Somebody help me.
Yes.
That kind of.
Yeah. Those hungry people.
Yeah. Hungry.
So people are coming out of the immersion event, off of the send off getaway. They're leaving with these really clear tools in their tool belt for disciple making. They got a date. They've got an email that they've crafted that they can just hit send on as soon as they've got 2 or 3 people that they've got in mind. They have the what, they know what kinds of training, so that's not going to lock them up. They know how, they know when they would do this and how this would work with their schedule and their situation. So you have to use your imagination. Imagine how much better it is to end the discipleship season having launched people with this level of clarity versus maybe doing a getaway where there's more trainings on topics that might be really valuable, but that it doesn't facilitate reproduction. So we're advocating you guys that you dedicate your send off to multiplication by helping them actually workshop out all of these things. And so April, you did this. Everyone came back, and what happened next? Like what happened after the send off?
So then I started a little bit of time passed, but then something I realized that I hadn't emphasized or told them about at all. And so I started doing this with my second group, was that there's this thing called Life Discipleship. It's a course you can take, and there's coaching calls every other week. And so I encourage them. I couldn't require it of them anymore because we weren't necessarily in that kind of relationship anymore. But I said, I strongly recommend that you guys do this just as you're doing your first group, at least. Take this course. They're really quick sessions or classes. I forget what you call them.
Videos, modules.
Videos, modules. Yeah. So it's doable, but you have to commit to it, put it on your rhythm somehow. Because rhythm was one thing that we had talked about. And so I was like, if you can plug a 10-minute module into your rhythm somewhere, that'd be super helpful for you. And I want to make sure we're not playing the telephone game with discipleship. I want to make sure that we're passing on the same DNA that makes sense, And so I encourage them to do that. And so I started following up with them and being kind of holding them a little bit accountable, or not necessarily accountable, but just saying hey, just a reminder, the coaching call is tomorrow. Put it on your calendar, put a reminder on your phone or whatever to show up to the call or whatever. And so with my second group, I'm really reminding them pretty often. Now, keep in mind, there is this course, and when you're leading up to your, discipleship round with some people, I think it'd be a good idea for you to go through the course. And then when you're actually doing it, I think it's a good idea to attend these calls. It's super encouraging. These coaching calls are very encouraging, and you're hearing people give out their ideas of how they're gonna do it or how they are doing it, and it's really encouraging.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think that one of the things that to make sure the seed is in the fruit, when you're done with your send off, how are you going to continue to support them as they try their first group? You can be there for them, but you can also just, send them into Life on Life, and we'll be there for them. Like, that's why we created this. So we'll help them. They'll get, the same DNA, the same blueprint will be reinforced on Life on Life. And so we want to be, this is a great tool. And then I think, April, you also just kept following up when, if there's any hesitations to pull the trigger.
Right? It is an intimidating thing to start, it's just depending on where you're at in your Christian walk, or how biblically literate you feel, or it can just, and the enemy can just come right in there and just remind you of all the things you don't know, or make you feel dumb and say, who do you think you are? And so it's just, I wanted to be a voice for them and to remind them hey, this is an act of radical discipleship to then go ahead and make disciples now. It doesn't mean you won't ever need to be discipled again. In fact, maybe the 12 months after this one, you're going to be looking for someone to disciple you again. And that's perfectly fine. I think we all need to be kind of ebbing and flowing in and out of this, being poured into and then pouring out. But for this, I want you guys to know you are capable. You do have something to offer. This is what Jesus is asking of us. Any believer, male, female, young, old, believer for a long time or a short time, Jesus is asking this of us.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, hopefully that was really helpful to you guys. Wanted to get that content out into the course. This is a lot longer than our normal videos, but I think this is really important to fill in that gap and also to emphasize what it takes to really see reproduction happen. So please keep in mind as you're making disciples, what is this tree looking like? Is there someday 10 years from now, 20 years from now, are you going to, if you mapped out how many generations your disciples have persistently made disciples, is that getting past the fourth, the fifth, the sixth generation? And if it does, you have started a movement. And this is the thing that starts movements, is I think being able to wield a full tool like we're describing here, but then also making sure this most critical piece that I think the enemy really comes against, and that is the reproduction, the seed that goes in the fruit. And we can get that seed in the fruit through the send off. So awesome. Thanks so much, April, for walking us through what you did. And yeah, I'm excited for the fruit that's going to come from everyone working to do send offs in this way going forward.
Well, friends, thanks for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to learn more about 1,000 Houses or discover what a season of coaching might look like for you and your household, visit 1kh.org. We'll see you for the next episode.